because we had the Arab Spring in the 2010s. And so now we are witnessing the Euro Spring, which began in Ukraine. The Arab Spring began in Tunisia, but it really, really showed its face in Egypt with the rise of the Muslim Brotherhood. It spread to Libya in 2011. It spread to Syria, really a series of revolutions by Islamists backed by the United States. That's why Al-Qaeda is ruling Syria. So the Americans are in the business of backing fanatics. And so now they're backing the fanatics in Europe. They backed the Nazis in Ukraine. Now they're backing the Nazis in Germany. In Germany, the country that gave us Hitler, the country that gave us the Holocaust, the SS, the concentration camps. America wants to bring back this beast. Let me show you guys a document that the United States government produced just recently. I have to read this to you guys. I read this earlier today, and I have to show this to you guys. Here is an actual document that was created by the Trump administration. And this document explains the foreign policy of the US government right now. Check this out. So it says here, promoting European greatness. You hear this? Promoting European greatness. Let's make Europe great again. Let's bring back the old powers. Let's make Germany powerful again. Let's revive German power. And the next step from this is, let's revive the Reich, because the greatest power that ever came out of Germany was the Third Reich. Ever since the 1870s, Germany was at its most powerful. The peak of German power was when Germany was under the Third Reich. So they're saying we got to bring back European greatness. That means what? That means what? Reviving German power. So it says here, American officials have become used to thinking about European problems in terms of insufficient military spending and economic stagnation. What does that mean? Insufficient military spending. Germany, you have to make your militaries more powerful. Germany, you need to spend more money in your military. You have to revive your military power. That's what that means. There is truth to this, but Europe's real problems are even deeper. But this economic decline is eclipsed by the real and more stark prospect of civilizational erasure. So what are the Americans telling the Germans? Your race is going to be erased. Your people are going to be erased. The German race is facing extinction. Extinction by who? By foreigners. So you have to bring back that old slogan of the Nazis, Germany for the Germans. And believe it or not, that was an actual slogan of the Nazi party. Germany for the Germans. The foreigners are a threat to Deutschland. Why do you think the Nazis had this ideology of blood and soil? The soil, the German land, the sacred German land, the blood, the sacred German race. And so the Americans, the Nazis, they believed that the German race was facing extinction. This is what the Nazis believed in. They believed that the German race was facing a conspiracy that wanted to see the German race being exterminated. And they believed that the conspirators for this evil scheme were the Jews. That's what they believed. That it was the Jews who wanted to exterminate the German race. They believed that if they did not kill all of the Jews, that Bolshevism would be advanced as an agenda and that Bolshevism would lead to the extermination of the German race. That's what they believed in. How do I know this? Because Michael Burleigh, one of the top most formidable historians on the Third Reich, tells us this. He even gives us the quotes from the various Nazi officials of how they used to think in those days and how they believed that if they don't exterminate the Jews, that the Jews will exterminate them. This is what they believed. So now you have the so in Germany, you have this rising belief that the white race is facing extinction under the hands of foreigners at the behest of grand conspirators. And that there is this left-wing or progressive agenda to exterminate the white race or the German race. They call this the Great Replacement Theory. And this was something that was horrendously popularized by the French New Right. And so the Americans today are coming along and they're saying the German race is facing extinction. And what is the solution? The solution is reviving nationalism. And what that really means ultimately is the revival of Nazism. That's what that means ultimately. So the Americans are they're really stoking the flames up for Nazism's revival. That's what that means. That's exactly what that means. The larger issue, now this is what the document said. This is from the US government. This is not some bullshit that some guy wrote as an opinion piece for foreign policy. Like, this is actually from Washington. So it says here, the larger issues facing Europe include activities of the European Union and other transnational bodies that undermine political liberty and sovereignty. Hello? Sovereignty. Sovereignty for who? For who? Now, this connects. We have to go back. We have to go back to earlier this year. What happened? Donald Trump got inaugurated, and Elon Musk did his infamous... What did Elon Musk do? Elon Musk did his infamous Sieg Heil. He did this. He did the infamous Sieg Heil, and he made it very, very obvious. And what was he really saying? I think what he was saying can be clearly seen in his actions in Germany. Because what Elon Musk began to do was support directly the AfD. Well, he was doing this before he did the Sieg Heil, and he continued to do this after he did the Sieg Heil gesture. He continues to support the AfD, and he uses his massively popular X platform to promote the AfD. The AfD is a modernly packaged Nazi party, the Alternative for Deutschland party. And the AfD has for its leader, really for its most popular leader, a guy by the name of Bjorn Höcke. Bjorn Höcke is a neo-Nazi. He was writing Nazi articles that were praising the Third Reich before he even became famous. Before he became famous, he was writing articles for some neo-Nazi magazine talking about how the Third Reich, if it were allowed to continue, would have been an envied empire in the modern world. This is what he said. So it's a repackaged, modernly marketed Nazi party, and Elon Musk has been its biggest supporter. And so Elon Musk does the Hitler salute. He supports a Nazi and militaristic party, or you could at least say an ultra-nationalistic and ultra-militaristic party. The AfD is a very militaristic party. They're very pro reviving the Bundeswehr, or the German armed forces. They want to revive the power of the German military, and they want to also bring back the draft. In fact, the AfD, out of all of the parties in Germany, the AfD is the most pro reviving the draft, or pro mandatory military service in Germany, out of all the German parties. And so Elon Musk does his Hitler salute. He praises this repackaged Nazi party, and Elon Musk does a speech not too long after this for the AfD. And he says in this speech that it's time for Germany to have military sovereignty, and it's time for Germany to forget about its history. Now, what the hell does that mean? It goes right back to what I've been saying. We are entering an era of killing sacred cows. And one of those sacred cows, if not the biggest sacred cow, is the Holocaust. And if the Germans kill that sacred cow, if the Western world kills the sacred cow of the Holocaust, then it becomes very easy to say that Hitler was great, Hitler was amazing, because the Holocaust, who cares about the Holocaust? Whether it happened or not, who cares about the Holocaust? Hitler was great, and we should go back to his ideas, and we should try to revive his policies. It becomes very easy to bring back the beast, so to speak. And it becomes very easy to do things like reviving German nationalism and mixing German militarist culture with German nationalist ideology. And you have a very, very dangerous Frankenstein being revived. And so Elon Musk is all for this. He's all for this. And so J.D. Vance comes along in the Munich Security Conference, and he says the Germans are not allowing freedom for the AFD. This is what J.D. Vance says. Because the German, you see, the custom or the tradition in German politics, ever since the end of World War II, was you never make friends with far-right parties. Never. You never do it. This has been the custom since the end of the Second World War in German politics. And the Germans, for the most part, have kept this custom. But again, this goes back to killing sacred cows. What did I say about killing sacred cows? We're entering an era of killing sacred cows. Women's suffrage, racial diversity, the Holocaust. These are all sacred cows. We're entering an era of killing sacred cows. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying this is the reality that we're facing. So the Americans come along, and Elon Musk, who's an American really at this point, comes along, and they say, you know, Germany, this whole sacred cow that you have of not joining forces with far-right parties, you have to kill that sacred cow. And J.D. Vance was berating the mainstream German parties for not collaborating with the AfD party. For not collaborating with the AfD party. J.D. Vance, the vice president, bashed the German government. Which means that J.D. Vance and the U.S. government wants the German government to support the Nazis. And they want the Nazis to come back. That's what they want. And Elon Musk comes along and says, Germany needs more military autonomy. What does that mean? More military sovereignty. That means getting the German military powerful again. It means bringing back German power. It means creating a new German Reich. That's what that means. And so it says here in this document, migration policies that are transforming the continent and creating strife, censorship of free speech, and suppression of political opposition. What does it mean by suppression of political opposition? I underlined this part for a reason, because this reflects exactly what J.D. Vance said when he was speaking at the Munich Security Conference. Stop suppressing the AfD. Stop suppressing the ultranationalists. Stop suppressing them. They want to enable and they want to empower the German ultranationalists. This is what the Americans are doing. And the Americans have done the same thing in the Middle East. Obama went to Egypt in 2011, and he openly expressed support for the Muslim Brotherhood. And he said that the Egyptian government needs to allow freedom to the Muslim Brotherhood. So Obama, really the U.S. government, went to Egypt and said, stop suppressing the Muslim Brotherhood. And the American government empowered the rise of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and kickstarted the entire Arab Spring, which really acted as a contagion that spread into Syria and spread into Iraq. And you had the Syrian civil war, and hundreds of thousands of people were killed. Right? Horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. So now you have the European version, the white version, so to speak, of what America did to the Middle East. America went to the Middle East and killed all the sacred cows. Saddam Hussein, the sacred cow in the Middle East was that dictators should rule. That was the sacred cow. America went to Egypt and said, no, Mr. Mubarak, you should not be the dictator any longer. You should empower, you should give freedom and power to the Muslim Brotherhood. What happened? The Muslim Brotherhood did a revolution backed by the United States. America went to Iraq and said, Saddam, you should no longer be the ruler here. And what did America do? They empowered Al-Qaeda in Iraq. They empowered the terrorists. America went to Syria and they said, Bashar al-Assad, you should no longer rule because we're killing the sacred cow of the Middle East, which is dictators should rule to preserve peace and stability and harmony. So the Americans went to Syria and they said, Bashar al-Assad, you shouldn't rule. You should give power to Al-Qaeda, to the Free Syrian Army. What happened in Syria? Al-Qaeda took over. And Trump is hanging out with Al-Qaeda. The fanatics. So the Americans will sit there and talk about how they hate fanaticism, how they love moderates, how they love democracy, but they go to the Middle East and they support the fanatics. They go to Europe and they do the same thing. And they have already done this. They've started to do this in Germany, but they really began this trend of America commencing the Euro Spring. We had the Arab Spring beginning in 2011, 2012. Now we're going through the European Spring or the Euro Spring. But the Euro Spring did not begin in Germany. It's beginning to happen in Germany, but it didn't begin. It didn't start. It didn't commence in Germany. It started in Ukraine. The Americans went to Ukraine and they said, Mr. Yanukovych, you have to step down because you're friendly with the Russians. You have to step down, Mr. Yanukovych. And the Americans put in Mr. Petro Poroshenko to rule over Ukraine. And Petro Poroshenko is an ultra-nationalist Ukrainian fanatic who loves the Ukrainian nationalist heroes. They're called heroes in Ukraine. I'm not saying they're heroes, but these are figureheads who are praised as heroes in Ukrainian society. Poroshenko praises the Ukrainian nationalist figureheads who collaborated with the Nazis. Bandera, Melnik, Shukovich, Nikola Lebed, all mass murderers, all Nazi collaborators. The Americans said, you have to now empower the lovers of the Nazi collaborators to rule over Ukraine. This is what the Americans did. This is exactly what they did. And the Americans backed the neo-Nazis in Ukraine. They backed Andrei Parubi, who was a member of Svoboda, which was the Ukrainian Nazi party, the armed branch of which is the Azov Battalion, which is now a part of the Ukrainian military. The Americans openly backed Ukraine's Nazi party. John McCain went to Kiev during the 2014 Euromaidan. Who was he hanging out with? He was hanging out with Mr. Tyanibok. Tyanibok is a major Ukrainian Nazi leader. He was the leader of the Ukrainian Nazi party, the Svoboda party. And John McCain shared a platform with Tyanibok. And he said, we are with you, Mr. Tyanibok. Openly supporting not someone who's a secret Nazi, not someone who dog whistles to Nazis, but someone who is openly a neo-Nazi who loves Adolf Hitler. McCain openly supported that guy. The U.S. government openly supported them. And the American government and NATO, the Americans, the British, the Germans, they all supported Nazis. And they all supported the Euromaidan. And the commandant of the Euromaidan was a guy by the name of Andrei Parubi, who was a part of the neo-Nazi Ukrainian Svoboda party. So this Euro Spring that we are witnessing, because we had the Arab Spring in the 2010s, and the Arab Spring really has reached its apex with the overthrowing of Bashar al-Assad. And so now we are witnessing the Euro Spring, which began in Ukraine. The Arab Spring began in Tunisia, but it really showed its face in Egypt with the rise of the Muslim Brotherhood. It spread to Libya in 2011. It spread to Syria in 2012 or so. And this was the Arab Spring that was backed, really a series of revolutions by Islamists backed by the United States. That's why Al-Qaeda is ruling Syria. So the Americans are in the business of backing fanatics. They're in the business of backing fanatics. And so now they're backing the fanatics in Europe. They backed the Nazis in Ukraine. Now they're backing the Nazis in Germany. In Germany! The country that gave us Hitler, the country that gave us the Holocaust, the SS, the concentration camps. America wants to bring back this beast. This is the scary reality that we're facing. This is it. And so you have J.D. Vance supporting it, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, all these guys. They're all interconnected. Donald Trump, they're all supporting this. And they want these Nazis to take over. Why? Because they want to empower the Germans to fight the Russians. It's the same reason why the Americans supported the Arab Spring. Why did the Americans support the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt? Why did the Americans support Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood in Syria? Why did they support Islamists in Libya? Why? Here is the reason why. If you look at the WikiLeaks from back when the Syrian revolution was very new, you will see that the Americans were talking about Turkey being the regional superpower that would control Syria. This was always the plan. Always, this was the plan. It was to empower the revival of the Ottoman Empire. So they said, Bashar al-Assad, he's with Iran. Iran hates Israel. Bashar al-Assad is not really a friend of Turkey. Erdogan comes along and he says, we're going to enter the Syrian civil war. He says this. He says, we're going to enter the Syrian civil war for the purpose of overthrowing Bashar al-Assad. And the Americans and the French and the British behind the curtains were all talking about enabling Turkey to control Syria. This was always the goal. Always, this was the goal. From the beginning. From the early 2010s to now. This has been the goal. And the goal has come to fruition. The goal has come to fruition. And now we see Turkey being the biggest power in Syria right now. I know now Israel and Turkey are competing over who's going to be the biggest power in that country. So by removing Bashar al-Assad, what did NATO do? They empowered Turkey to control Syria. By removing Gaddafi, what did NATO do? They empowered Turkey to have a military presence in Libya, a massive military presence in Libya. So by doing the Arab Spring, the Americans empowered one of their biggest wild cards against the Russians, and that is the Turks on the Black Sea and on the Mediterranean. And who has a small military base in Syria? Russia does. And the Americans want that removed. And so they empower Turkey. Remove Bashar, empower Turkey in Syria. Now, the same type of concept in this policy is being seen in Europe. The Americans want to weaken Russia in Europe. They want to make sure that Russia never becomes the big power in Europe. So what do? They go to Ukraine in 2014. They empower the Euromaidan. They empower the Nazis. Who are the biggest haters of the Russians in Ukraine? The Nazis. Who butchered the Russians in Ukraine during World War II? The Nazis and their Ukrainian nationalist acolytes, the Banderites, the followers of Andrei Melnik, OUNB, OUNM, the followers of Andrei Melnik, the followers of Roman Shukovich, the followers of Nikola Lebed. These were the biggest enemies of the Russians. And so if you're a grand evil genius and a strategist, and you see human beings like pawns in a giant geopolitical game of chess, what are you going to do to push Russia's people out of Ukraine? You're going to promote the biggest enemy of the Russians in Ukraine, and that is the Nazis. And that's what America did. That is what the United States did. And not just the United States, but the Germans did this also. The Germans wanted the Nazis in Ukraine to rise up. And it's quite amazing that when the Germans had their Third Reich, and when they were doing Operation Barbarossa, and when they were in Ukraine, and they were backing the Nationalists, the Banderites, the OUN, the UPA, when they were backing these people, SS Nachtigall and all these Ukrainian nationalist paramilitary groups, the Germans did so. They backed these Ukrainian nationalists for the purpose of fighting against the Russians. And what did the Germans do through the Euromaidan? The same damn thing. They said, we have to revive our old friends, the Ukrainian Nazis in Ukraine. And that's exactly what they did. And in fact, Scott Horton talks about this in his book, Provoked, how the Europeans, the Germans, the Americans, they all wanted to back these Nazis in Ukraine. And so people are talking about how, oh, the Third Reich's never going to come back. We're literally seeing the beginning stages of the revival of the Third Reich. We started to see the beginning stage of the revival of this Frankenstein in Ukraine, in the Euromaidan. And the purpose of helping those Nazis was the same purpose that the Americans was for the same purpose that the Americans helped Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood in the Muslim world. It was to enable Russia's biggest historical enemies by empowering, because the biggest historical enemies of the Russians are who? The Turks and the Germans. The Turks, because of all of the wars that the Russians fought with the Ottoman Empire, and the Germans because of World War I and World War II, which were the biggest wars and the most brutal wars and the deadliest wars that Russia ever fought in its history. So by enabling the Nazis, the Americans then empower Russia's biggest historical enemies, the Nazis, in Europe. Russia's biggest historical enemies in Europe, the Nazis. And so they started this Euro Spring in Ukraine with the revival of Nazism, with the Euromaidan. And now they're doing the same damn thing in Germany. And they want to empower the Nazis and the militarists and the ultranationalists in Germany because they want to revive Russia's biggest European enemy. That's what this is about. That's all this is about. And the Americans thought, and the British thought, after World War I, that they could use the Nazis and the fascists to go against Bolshevism. Remember what happened after World War I. You had these German nationalist soldiers in the Baltic regions and in Silesia who wanted to fight Bolshevism. And they formed what is known as the Freikorps. And they said, we're going to fight the Bolsheviks. We're going to slow down the Bolshevik advance into the Baltic region and into Silesia. And the Americans said, go right ahead and do it. The Americans loved these ultra-nationalist German soldiers, and they used them. The Americans used them as a proxy to fight the Bolsheviks, and fight they did. And then eventually, those soldiers went back to Germany as heroes. They were embraced by the German people. They were embraced by Adolf Hitler. And when Hitler formed his Nazi party, some of his most ardent followers, some of his most fanatical followers were Freikorps guys. They were guys who were members of the Freikorps who fought the Bolsheviks. And the Freikorps guys were saying, we fought the Bolsheviks after World War I, and now we're going to finish them off in this great war for European civilization. This is what they were saying. This is what these German nationalist soldiers were saying. And the Americans used them. And the Americans pumped Germany with money for the purpose of empowering Germany and making Germany strong again so that they could use the Germans to fight the Bolsheviks, to fight the Soviets. And Germany ended up becoming a leviathan that the Americans nor the British could not control. And today, what do we see? We see the Americans empowering the Germans, empowering the German nationalists for the same reason. They want to use the Germans to fight the Russians. And eventually what's going to happen is the formation of a German Frankenstein. That's what's going to happen. So they're saying, Mr. German government, you're suppressing these nationalists. Don't do that. Support the German nationalists. And you have these morons in America, these Ameritards, saying, oh, J.D. Vance is so right. He's so right. Freedom of speech for the Nazis. Yes, those people need freedom. They need freedom. Yeah, just like Obama said, the Muslim Brotherhood needs freedom. You fucking assholes. And now you want to revive this Nazi monster because you have some weird X-inspired just nutball idea of reviving nationalism because you hate the liberals and you want to give it to the libs and you want to bring back the Austrian painter just to give it to the libs. This is how self-destructive we've become as in modern society. Suppression of political opposition, right? And then it says that the Germans have cratering birth rates, which is true, and loss of national identities. Hello. Loss of national identities. In other words, you see, all of this sounds good on paper. Oh, they're talking about national identity, the importance of national identity. What's wrong with that, Theodore? You see, this is the problem with people, is that they refuse to see nuance. There's nothing wrong with having a national identity. The thing is that this idea of national identity that they are promoting is a packaged deal. It's not just national identity. It's not just we are Germans. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that's going to come along with it. And that is, oh, we're Germans, proud Germans. Deutschland, Deutschland über alles. Great history. Must revive great German military. Must revive the old German uniforms. Must revive some of the old marching tunes. Must revive some of the old symbols that we used to use that we can't use anymore. Oh, and let's also be proud of our great military leaders. Not just Otto von Bismarck, not just Wilhelm II. Let's praise, I don't know, General Hans von Seeckt, who facilitated and empowered the Armenian genocide during World War I. Yeah, I'm sure you guys have never heard of that name. Hans von Seeckt, go look up his name. Hans von Seeckt. Seeckt is S-E-E-C-K-T, I believe. Hans von Seeckt was a major German military leader during World War I, and he watched as Germany's ally, the Ottoman Empire, genocided over 1 million Armenians, and Hans von Seeckt said that the German government and the German military must support the genocide of the Armenians. And Hans von Seeckt said that we should not allow our Christian sentimentalism to provoke us to save Armenians. Here is one of Germany's great World War I commanders. What about another great German World War I commander? Erich Ludendorff. General Erich Ludendorff, who was Hitler's first funder, who funded the National Socialist Party. And Erich Ludendorff was considered a great war hero. He was considered a great general. World War I. And you know what's amazing is the Freikorps guys, they loved Erich Ludendorff. And they loved Hans von Seeckt. And those Freikorps guys, you know, they fought Bolshevism after World War I. Maybe they're going to be seen as heroes in future Germany. And then from there, why not just praise Adolf Hitler and the SS while you're at it? I mean, listen, there's a politician in Germany. His name is Maximilian Krah. You can look him up. Krah is K-R-A-H. Maximilian Krah, big politician in Germany. Do you know what he said recently? He said, you know, the SS is officially recognized as a criminal organization by the German government. Maximilian Krah, this politician who's a nationalist in Germany, said, the SS actually were not really all criminals. Some of them were great people. Some of them were great people. So that means that if they want to start honoring World War II historical figures, they're going to pick some SS officers. They're going to whitewash their history, make them look like a bunch of heroes. And then they're going to say, you see, we have our great SS heroes who are actually good guys, and they were demonized as being villains. But you see, they're living proof that not all SS officers were bad. Some of them were great, and we're going to honor the great ones. And then from there, it'll just escalate to, you know, let's just honor Joseph Mengele. Let's just honor, what's his name? Bach-Zelewski, one of the major leaders of the SS. Let's just honor Heinrich Himmler, who was the main leader of the SS. Why not? At that point, you see where it's going? It's like the Canadian assisted suicide policy. The Canadians said, "Oh, we're not going to kill people because they're mentally ill. We're going to give assisted suicide just to people who are terminally ill." And then from there it went to, well, we're going to give assisted suicide to people who are sick but they're not terminally ill. And then from there it went to, you know what? If you're a little bit depressed, you can come to our office and we'll stick a bullet in your head and kill you. It just doesn't stop. When you give the devil an inch, the fucker takes a mile. He don't stop. The guy don't stop. Evil doesn't stop. It just goes on, and it takes, and it takes, and it takes, and it takes. And so when they start talking about being proud of one's national identity, do you know what they're really referring to? They are referring to identitarianism. And I am quite familiar with the, European identitarian movement because I debated one of their biggest leaders back in 2017. His name is Martin Zellner. Our debate is still on YouTube. I debated this guy. He's a very intelligent guy, Austrian identitarian leader. He is the leader of the Austrian branch of the identitarian movement, which really stems from France. And so I'm very familiar with that movement. And the identitarian movement, I don't give a damn what the identitarians say or how they try to market themselves to make themselves look sanitized. I really don't give a damn. It is a Nazi organization. They have all sorts of Nazi, they love to reference old Nazi intellectuals from the days of the Third Reich. They love this idea of blood and soil. They speak about blood and soil all the time. These people are hardcore nationalists. And if they ever get the chance to do so, they will say that they will try to make Hitler into a national hero again. And so they call themselves identitarians because they have this religion of what? Of national identity. So when this document is saying, well, we have to bring back European national identity. So if you say Germans bring back national identity, you're talking about Germans subscribing to identitarianism, ultranationalism, Deutschland über alles. If you tell a Latvian or an Estonian, hey, you guys need to have pride in your national identities, do you know what that means? That means the Estonians going to the SS officers, looking back to the SS officers, and the Latvians looking back to the SS officers who were Estonians or who were Latvians, who were collaborators with the Nazis, and saying that those SS officers were heroes. If you go to the Baltic region, there is a very strong cult of the SS. If you go to Latvia, if you go to Estonia, those countries, very strong cult of the SS. Very strong cult. And they honor the Estonians and the Latvians who joined the SS as heroes. So if you tell a Latvian or an Estonian, you should be proud of who you are. That means, oh, I get a green light to praise the SS. You see, it's a package deal. It's not just saying, oh, we're Latvians or we're Germans, we're Austrians. It's a package deal. That's the dangerous reality that we're facing. And this is and the Americans are promoting this, just like they promote Al-Qaeda. They're promoting this. Should present trends continue, the continent will be unrecognizable in 20 years or less. So the Americans are saying that in 20 years, Europe is going to lose its Europeanness. And so they're saying Europeans need to become ultranationalist. Germany for the Germans, Sweden for the Swedes. That's what that means. And you could say there's nothing wrong with it. And on paper, there is nothing wrong with it, right? There's nothing wrong with saying Germany for the Germans. On paper, there's nothing wrong with saying that. But it's a package deal. I don't have an issue with people saying, hey, listen, I want to make sure that Germany stays German. I don't have an issue with that. I understand that. You don't want your country to look like Somalia. I get it. But what I'm trying to tell you guys is that there's a package deal that comes with it. It's not just going to be, hey, Germany for the Germans. It's going to be Germany for the Germans, Sieg Heil, honor the Führer, and let's bring back the swastika. That's what it's going to be. It's going to be a big problem. It's going to be a big, massive conflagration of fanaticism, militarism, and blood. But they're promoting this paranoia about European identity, and they're saying the Europeans are going to lose their culture in 20 years, and Europe will no longer be Europe in 20 years. So that's why you guys have to turn to nationalism. If you subscribe to, let's say, nationalism in Austria or nationalism in Germany, you are going to join the identitarian movements. It's just a fact. It's just a fact. That's the movement you're going to join. And so if you tell Germans, and this is why this is so dangerous, and this is why this is so reckless, if you tell Germans, become nationalists, if you tell Austrians, be nationalist, they are going to join Nazi groups. It's just a fact. The biggest nationalist movement in Germany and Austria are what is known as the identitarian movement. That is the biggest movement. If you join that, you're joining a repackaged Nazi group. They love reading Heidegger. They love reading Schmidt. They love talking about the race. They love talking about the Jews, der Juden. Yes, they talk about this. I've read their writings. I spent a lot of time reading through their stuff. Martin Zellner writes about the Jews and how Germany has this obsession with Jews and how Jews, this whole obsession with the Holocaust is the ruin of Germany, etc. They love talking this way. They love Bjorn Höcke, who is a neo-Nazi politician in Germany, very popular one. So it's very dangerous. People have no idea how dangerous this is. If you tell Austrians or Germans, become nationalists, they're going to go to Martin Zellner. They're going to go to Bjorn Höcke. That's who they're going to go to. That's who they're going to go to. And who did Elon Musk support? And who does he continuously support? Bjorn Höcke, the most popular leader in the AfD party. So the Americans are reviving Nazism. As such, it is far from obvious whether certain European countries will have economies and military strong enough to remain reliable allies. You see this? You see what do you see what they're doing here? It is far from obvious whether certain European countries will be reliable enough. Will we be able to rely on the German military? Will we be able to rely on the Scandinavian militaries? Will we be able to rely on any of these European militaries? I don't know. I'm not sure. And see, this is all about stoking up militarism in Europe. They want to push and incentivize the Germans to revive their military power. And so the Germans are seeing this, and they're saying, no, we are reliable, America. We're absolutely reliable. Okay, Germany, then revive your military strength. Many of these nations are currently doubling down on the present path. We want Europe to remain European. Translation, white. We want Europe to remain white. And so that means getting rid of foreigners. That's what that means. And if these ultranationalists take power, and they will erect camps. And it's going to be very ugly. It's going to be very ugly. But you see, that's what this whole migrant crisis was about. It was about reviving this monster. It was about stoking up nationalism, getting people to hate foreigners, and getting these ultra-nationalistic parties in power. That's what this was about. We want Europe to remain European, to regain its civilizational self-confidence. What does that mean? Civilizational self-confidence. Bringing back that old Prussian militarism. Bringing back that old Wehrmacht militarism. That's what that means. And to abandon its failed focus on regulatory suffocation. What does it mean by regulatory suffocation? This document is referring to the custom that Germany had for years of being very frugal when it came to defense spending. The Germans were very frugal for many decades when it came to defense spending. When it came to spending on Germany's military, they were very strict. And the Americans are saying, no more. Stop being strict on spending money on the military. Get the German military industry back up. Bring back the German military industrial complex. I'm just amazed, and this really coincides. It really coincides with what was said by Mr. Whitaker, who is America's representative in NATO. Mr. Whitaker said in the Berlin Security Conference not too long ago that America hopes to see the day when the Germans will be a powerful military force again. Trump wants Germany to take over NATO, and this was expressed by Whitaker. I have to pay the paywall, but this was expressed by Whitaker at the Berlin Security Conference recently, in which he said that the United States wants to see Germany become the most powerful country in Europe, and the United States wants to see Europe become just as powerful as the United States. So this is the agenda. They're making it very obvious. This is the agenda, to revive European nationalism. And you see all this stuff about wokeism and the SJW stuff, all of this is by design. It was all by design, in my opinion. It was all by design. Get the SJWs to talk about how they hate white people, talk about how much they hate whiteness, how white people are the enemy. And what does that do? And what did that do? It got the white man all riled up. It got the white man riled up in America. It got the white man riled up in Europe. Tell them that that they're evil because they're white. Tell the Germans that they still have Jewish blood on their hands from the Holocaust. Tell them that. Get them pissed off. And it worked. And the reaction that we got as a result of all that was this. Ultranationalism. And you have all these people today, and I've seen this before with the I'm probably going to step on some toes here, but I've seen this a lot with people who are like trad Catholics or people who are converts to Eastern Orthodoxy. These people, they'll become trad Catholics, or they'll become Eastern Orthodox. They'll convert to Eastern Orthodoxy. And you listen to them, and they're talking about why the woke are the enemy. They're talking about why the SJWs are the enemy, and those are the bad guys. We got to go against those guys. It's the progressives. It's that. It's the anti-white people. Those are the real bad guys. And they're saying all this stuff. And then they'll start backing. I've seen this before with the trad Catholics and the converts to Eastern Orthodoxy on the internet. Then they'll start talking about why we have to support nationalism, because the woke guys, the wokies, are the bad ones. They're the arch nemesis. And so it's all about so they start becoming white nationalists under the facade of Christianity. Under this mask of Christianity, they start promoting this white nationalism stuff. And they start saying, well, we have to support these nationalist groups in Europe because because we have to go against the woke and the woke and the woke. And people buy into this stuff, and they never stop and think, hey, wokeism is very unpopular. Wokeism is rejected tremendously because it's bad for marketing and bad for businesses. That's why you don't see woke stuff in Target anymore, or really in any other major convenience stores, because it's bad for business. So how in the hell can wokeism be this arch nemesis if it's so unpopular and if it lacks so much influence now? And they're acting as if this wokeism stuff is still a big thing. It's not. What's a big thing now is the reaction to wokeism, which is white nationalism, European nationalism, ultramilitarism, going back to Hitler, all that stuff. And they want you to think that the reaction is the good thing. The reactionaries are the good guys. And this wokeism stuff is still the big bad villain. When the reality is that these people are walking around like Don Quixote, fighting windmills, thinking that they're fighting dragons. Buddy, knighthood is dead. The dragons are no more. You're fighting windmills. And they're fighting a windmill, thinking they're the good guys, when the reality is that they've just joined the devil. They've just gotten in bed with the fucking devil. This lack of self-confidence is most evident in Europe's relationship with Russia. European allies enjoy a significant hard power advantage over Russia by almost every measure save nuclear weapons. Why would it say that? Why would it say, hey, Europe, you really lack self-confidence? And Europe, don't you know that you're actually more powerful than Russia in every sphere of military ability, with the exception of nuclear weapons? And this is actually, to a great extent, true. Because the EU does have over 500 million people. Europe does have over 500 million people. It does have more manpower than Russia. Europe, in a conventional war, the EU, in a conventional war, can defeat the Russians. After, of course, really advancing their military capabilities. But after that, the EU does have the ability of defeating the Russians in a conventional war. This is true. And so the Americans are saying, Europe, Mr. Germany, you actually are quite powerful. Don't you know that? Why are you so unconfident, Germany? Why are you so unconfident, EU? Don't you guys know you can beat the Russians? You see what the Americans are doing? They're egging on the Europeans. They're getting the Europeans incentivized to return back to militarism so that they can use the Germans and their European auxiliaries as proxies against the Russians. The question is, what's going to happen when the Germans get so big that they're not going to see any need to even collaborate with the Americans, to even cooperate with the Americans? I mean, what's going to happen? Because the EU is the second biggest economy in the world. It's not China. Everyone says it's China. China is the second biggest single economy. But really, the second biggest economy on Earth is not China. It's the European Union. It's worth trillions upon trillions of dollars. It's massively wealthy. So once this German Leviathan rises up and you have this pan-European military force led by Germany, this Fourth Reich will have the ability to defeat Russia in a conventional war. And this is what the Americans are saying. They're saying, Europe, you have the capacity to become strong enough to defeat the Russians. And this is what the Americans want the Europeans to think, because they want the Europeans to rise up against the Russians. And so it says here, the Ukraine war has had the perverse effect of increasing Europe's, especially Germany's, external dependencies. What is it referring to? What external dependencies? Russian oil. That's what it's referring to. Russian oil, natural gas. So the Americans are saying, you know, you Germans are dependent on Russian oil. In fact, this is what Donald Trump said during his first term. He said that Germany is a slave to Russia because Germany still buys Russian oil. So they want to get the Europeans off the Russian oil. Well, in such a case, where would the Europeans get their oil from? They could get it from Romania. They can get it from Norway. They can get it from Central Asia. Central Asia is a massive concentration center for natural gas. It's one of the main gas centers of the globe. Central Asia, Kazakhstan, the stands, really, Uzbekistan, these countries, they are massive, massive zones for natural gas. And what happened recently? Donald Trump supposedly brokered a ceasefire between the Armenians and the Azeris. And what was stipulated in that agreement that Donald Trump brokered? One of the specifics of this deal was that Armenia would essentially give up its border with Iran to the United States, to NATO, and allow NATO infrastructure to be built on the Armenian part of the border with Iran, right on Armenia's border with Iran. And the purpose of that, obviously, is to further isolate the Iranians. That's true. But also, remember, Turkey is a part of NATO. And Azerbaijan is an extension of Turkish power. And what the Americans got the Armenians to agree to was for a massive corridor to be built connecting Azerbaijan with Nakhchivan. So Azerbaijan, Armenia, Nakhchivan is this little red region right here. Here's Turkey. Turkey borders with Armenia, but it also borders with Nakhchivan. Azerbaijan and Turkey, they want a corridor that would link this little red region with Azerbaijan. They defeated the Armenians. The Armenians have no choice but to agree to allow a corridor to be built from Nakhchivan through Armenian territory into Azerbaijan. This corridor will make importing natural gas from Central Asia a lot easier, because now these Central Asian countries can export their natural gas through the Caspian Sea, through Azerbaijan, through Armenia, through Nakhchivan, straight into Turkey, and Turkey is a major NATO ally. So the Europeans can then transport oil directly from oil and natural gas, that is, directly from NATO. Turkey is part of NATO. So instead of having the oil or the natural gas transported through Russia, they can get it from the Caspian Sea through the South Caucasus region into Turkey, and then from Turkey into the rest of Europe. You'll see here's the Caspian Sea. Central Asia's over here. If you get the oil through Russia, you would have to go through the Black Sea. And the Black Sea is partially controlled by Russia. But with this corridor through Armenia, you can just get the oil and the natural gas through the Caspian into Azerbaijan, directly into a NATO territory, Turkey. And then from there, directly into mainland Europe. So this is a much better deal. This weakens the Russians, and it makes it much more convenient for the Germans and the other Europeans to import tons of natural gas from Central Asia. So this is in the agenda. This is the plan, or at least one of the plans that the Germans have to cut themselves off from being energy dependent on the Russians. So it says here, American diplomacy should continue to stand up for genuine democracy, freedom of expression. They said the same thing about Egypt, by the way, when they were backing the Muslim Brotherhood. They talked about democracy and freedom when they were backing Al-Qaeda in Syria. So now they're talking about democracy and freedom when talking about backing Nazis in Europe. It's the same thing. People fall for this, but I see right through it. And unapologetic celebrations of European nations, individual character, and history. Now, this is scary. This one really gets me. Look at this. Look at this. American diplomacy should continue to stand up for genuine democracy, freedom of expression, and unapologetic celebrations of European nations' individual character and history. Unapologetic. You know what that means, right? That means killing the sacred cow of the Holocaust. That means shattering the Holocaust narrative. And I'm not saying that this is a good thing. I don't like what's happening, guys. I don't like Holocaust denialism. I don't. But that's what's happening, and America's pushing it. Unapologetic celebrations of European nations' individual character and history. It doesn't say except for the Holocaust or Nazism. It doesn't say that. So the Americans are saying, Europeans, Germans, Austrians, you should be unapologetically proud of your history. So I can be proud of Operation Barbarossa. I can be proud of the SS. I can be proud of Hitler. I can see Hitler as a great war hero and as a great fighter against the evils of Bolshevism. Really? I can do that? Oh, yes. America has given the green light. America has given the green light to this cultural trend, or to this recent trend, I should say, of becoming proud of Nazi history. Here we go. America encourages its political allies in Europe to promote this revival of spirit. Hello. America encourages its political allies in Europe. Who are America's political allies in Europe? Who did J.D. Vance support when he was in the Munich Security Conference? Who does Elon Musk support in Germany and in Austria? The ultranationalists, the identitarians, the AfD. And the American government is now saying, we encourage these groups, our political allies in Europe, to promote this revival of spirit. What spirit? What demonic presence are they trying to promote here? They're promoting what Bjorn Holke wants. What did Bjorn Holke speak of years ago? He said, the time has come when we must have here in Germany a complete and total 180-degree shift away from the Holocaust narrative. This is what Bjorn Holke said. A 180-degree shift from the Holocaust narrative. And he pointed to a Holocaust memorial in Berlin, and he said it's because he said this damn policy of remembering the Holocaust has been our downfall, has weakened us, has made us into a defeated people.
Und diese dämliche Bewältigungspolitik, die lähmt uns heute noch viel mehr als zu Franz Josef Strauß Zeiten. Wir brauchen nichts anderes als eine erinnerungspolitische Wende 180 Grad.
So they're going to take this ideology as a foundation for this revival of nationalism. And the Americans are saying, do it. Go ahead. You see, This is what I've been warning you guys about for years. I talked about this before in prior videos. I talked about this. It's really surreal what's happening. This is happening. Our goal should be to help Europe correct its current trajectory. We will need a strong Europe to help us successfully compete against who? The Russians and the Chinese. And to work in concert with us to prevent any adversary from dominating Europe. Who is America worried? Who is America worried about when it comes to dominating Europe? America is worried about the Russians dominating Europe. That has always been the concern of NATO going all the way back to the Cold War. So it's saying we got to have a strong Europe, not just a strong Europe, a nationalistic Europe. A nationalistic Europe that is unapologetically proud of European history. And they're saying this to the AfD. They're saying this to Björn Höcke. They're saying this to the identitarians in Germany. Let us be unapologetically proud of our history. And you're telling this to people who hate Holocaust memorials. We want to work with aligned countries that want to restore their former... Look at this, look at this, look at this, look at this. We, America, want to work with aligned countries that want to restore their former greatness. It's like they're not even hiding it. They're out in the open about it. They want to align with countries that want to restore their former greatness. Which countries that are aligned with America want to restore their former greatness? The Turks want to restore the Ottoman Empire. And the Germans want to restore the Reich. And the Americans did the Arab Spring to overthrow the secular dictatorships so as to enable Turkey to rise as a power in the Middle East. And that's exactly what happened, because they removed Bashar al-Assad, and that enabled Turkey to take over Syria. They removed Gaddafi, and that enabled Turkey to take over Libya. That now you have thousands of soldiers in Libya, and you have a massive Turkish naval presence in the Mediterranean. And they did the Euro Spring in Ukraine, and now they're commencing more of this Euro Spring in the rest of Europe to revive German power, so they can use the Germans against the Russians. You see, it's a what's the term? It's a pattern. That's what's happening. It's a total pattern, and it's very predictable. But they're saying, restore your former greatness. Define former greatness. Former greatness could mean the Third Reich. Former greatness could mean the Second Reich. Either way, you're talking about German imperialism in Europe. That's what you're talking about. And even if you restore the Second Reich, what did the Second Reich become eventually? It became Weimar. And then from there, it became the Third Reich. So no matter how you look at this formula, no matter how you look at this strategy, the Americans are really bringing back the German Leviathan. That's what's happening. Over the long term, it is more than plausible that within a few decades at the latest, certain NATO members will become majority non-European. Again, get the white man riled up. As such, it is an open question whether they will view their place in the world or their alliance with the United States in the same way as those who signed the NATO Charter. Our broad policy for Europe should prioritize enabling Europe to stand on its own feet, make a massive pan-European powerhouse led by the Germans. The Americans are saying this explicitly. They're saying this explicitly. They're telling the Germans, restore your former glory. Be unapologetically proud of your history. Become militarily sovereign. Rise up on your own feet and become so powerful militarily that you will not need American help. This is the fucking Fourth Reich. What else could this be? What else are they describing here? Imagine a massive European power led by Germany with integrated military forces. What is that? That's the Fourth Reich. That's the next Holy Roman Empire. That's the Habsburgs. So that's it. That's the document. I mean, the Americans are making this so obvious now. And you know, as time goes on, they're just going to make themselves more and more obvious. They're going to make their interests, their demands, their agenda more and more obvious and clear. They're just getting more obvious. Last year, they weren't talking like this. Last year, the White House was not talking like this. I mean, look at the words that it uses. Look at this. We want to work with aligned countries that want to restore their former greatness. Germany, Deutschland, restore your former greatness. Make Germany for the Germans. That's what they're saying. Make Germany for the Germans. Restore your former greatness. Become a powerful military force again. Well, how can you do that without militarist culture? How can you do that without reviving some old militarist culture that we buried long ago because of the defeat of Nazi Germany? How would you do that without reviving ultranationalism? How would you do that without reviving a fanatical militarism? It's impossible. It's impossible to do any of these things without nationalist pride and ideological militarism that is tied to some form of racism or racialism and some form of blood and soil paradigm. So the Americans are setting up the formula. They're giving us the foundation for the formula here. They don't have to say, hey, do a Sieg Heil. But that becomes very obvious. That is the logical conclusion out of this. That's the logical conclusion from this. The logical conclusion is, I am proud of my history, unapologetically proud to use the American terminology. And therefore, I'm going to do exactly what Elon Musk did during Trump's inauguration. Boom. There's no stopping it at this point.